Good to have you. No, I do not like that.
I was on the screen now, bro.
I'll just speak the name of this one, just like the album.
Is it great?
Like a close up on. Wait, do you know that?
LeBron James.
Yeah.
I know LeBron.
See everybody behind me.
LeBron, yeah. But wait, what was the reference?
No.
Well, I can't believe my shoes came in. They were supposed to come in like next week.
That's kind of crazy, actually.
Thanks, Rolly.
Huh? Oh yeah, no problem, bro. I got plenty where that comes from.
Yeah, I have a bunch of LA. I have a palette of LA.
I'll trade you one of those for an LA.
Yeah.
Like you just be like no tattoo.
Vince. Good to see you guys.
Miami, he started doing that.
Bro, Miami, they're about to win again tonight.
Not at all. Well, Lakers.
No, the Heat, they're gonna win again tonight. Just watch, bro. The Raptors got lucky, dude.
Defending champions, I told you.
Man, they were defending something last night. They got lucky that they didn't get beat.
Nah, definitely.
Yeah, that's what it is, man. So, but he would use.
Nothing against Caleb. I'm a little high up in the priority.
Wait, he did when he like scored or like when
No, he did like before the game. He'll go like with
That's so weird.
the commentators all acting and the whole like.
We're cool. Look at you. You got your own, you got your own square. I was like, okay.
Like, so if I look over there, is my face on the screen now? Like,
Look direct. Yeah.
Yeah.
You. Intimidate everybody behind you.
I know.
Dude, it's not
I scared you.
entire time.
No way, I don't know.
Hey, Kaden,
Definitely were.
it's not to be on you the entire time.
I know, I don't like that at all, actually.
That sits there and it's on him the entire time.
Just don't be like Stephen McCurdy.
Yeah. Like it'll zoom in, it'll zoom in like it's
On Friday,
it'll
are we
zoom in.
presenting the same day, like, we
No.
do the same chapter?
When you,
Hey.
well, you will present a person from the same chapter that, that's, you're presenting your person. There may be two people presenting from the same chapter, but they will also be presenting on different days. Would you know how to access the calendar for your class? This is a general question to everyone.
I didn't know that was on that thing.
Yes.
When you open up the calendar in Populi for your class, it will show you on that calendar where, on what day you should be prepared to present.
Oh, so you're doing Monday. Yeah. Not next Monday.
The Monday, so
Oh. I think that's what it is.
So Nick, you're
Next
the
Friday.
11th,
Okay, I thought it was this Friday, like today.
and
I was ready. I'm good with you.
so just keep that in mind.
Well, it's not cool yet, but it
I'm gonna say it was convenient.
And I got the shoes now, too.
Just the class.
That's nice.
I'm not sure. Be so
So
excited.
it's your first day back. Your shoes just came.
There's no cost.
Dog just knew I needed to buy that.
Keep looking at myself.
Yeah.
I don't like that. Dr. Sandy,
You don't like seeing
Was video
I
okay?
don't like
I'll allow that.
being in front of it.
It's not really connected to that chapter. It just happens to be there in that box, but we're not doing we're not really doing the other chapter, and it'll be fine.
Okay.
Second fun.
Kind of felt bad. I already have my PowerPoint for the top. Sammy. Sammy, it's still, it's okay. I already know.
Well, you should have,
Pass. I turned it in like that night.
right, so if you if you were working on your PowerPoint before you turned in your person, you should have turned it in before him.
Oh, no, I turned it in that day.
I know.
It didn't work. Are you saying before? Okay.
See,
Yeah, I submitted it late, but I worked on it like.
it was on time, but it was closer to being late than other people from your chapter.
I'm talking tonight.
Okay.
It's good to have everyone.
There we go. All right, so we want to begin. If you were paying attention to the calendar early on, you would know that today was test day. We're not doing tests today. But we will be probably finishing up our material related to this chapter today. And then Monday, we will start we will start into a new unit. We will have our test Wednesday though, so that you are not trying to it will, I know it's doing that, but we'll have to figure out why, what's going on if that keeps happening. But so be prepared, next Wednesday will be the test over this material, and all the other due dates will stay the same. We're just having our test a little later. So let's have prayer. Father, we do pray for your spirit, for your grace, for your help in what we are involved with, and that you are working in and through us in all that we do. I pray that you will continue to keep our campus safe and related to the virus and the things that are associated with it. I pray that you will continue to give Dr. Speed strength as he recovers. And in this class, help us to learn and understand. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Now, the somehow there's a misconnection here, so it constantly is saying hello to itself by beeping like that. Now, this is a picture of the Ishtar Gate, which is now in, which was the gate that went into Babylon. It is now in Berlin. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon is being rebuilt, has been rebuilt substantially by Saddam Hussein. So if you ever decide to go on vacation to Iraq and you want to visit Babylon, you can. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, Zoroastrianism and Persia and the Persian Empire. Need be. This was developed by Cyrus the Great, and the Persian expansion that will occur later on. This country, Persia, is what we now know as Iran. Persia will expand into India. It will also move into what we think of today as Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Asia Minor, and control this whole area. Now, they are never able to conquer Greece in any significant way. And this becomes something of interest to them. They will, if you know of the story of the
Good grief.
it must have something to do with I'm gonna point this out. Looking there, and my problem is my connection here, so I need to figure out what my issue is. Why that's having trouble recognizing itself. Anyway, deal with that later. This here, the Babylonians will move from Susa, which is would be the capital of the Persian Empire, which is NIV for Shushan. Shushan is this word used in the King James for the capital of the Persian Empire. And that's how her mother selected her name too, by picking it out of the scripture. But Susa is the same city right there. The satraps were provinces into which the empire was divided. Governed by a governor in each province. And they governed their country based on tolerance and peace, wanting to treat people fairly. Very opposite of the Assyrians that were built their system on cruelty. And if you remember, it was the Persians who allowed the Israeli refugees that were taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar and earlier by the 10 tribes that were taken by the Assyrians into Iraq to go home. They allowed everyone to be free and independent. Now, their imperial religion is Zoroastrianism, which I have listed up there. It's still a popular religion, maybe not so much right now, in Iran, because the Iranian government, the Islamic government, is trying to decimate it. But it is a religion that sees evil and good sort of in a titanic struggle. And really what you want to be, if you're a good Zoroastrian, is either really evil or really holy. It's not in between where you don't want to be. And that both sides are equally matched and fight against each other. And so you really could have monasteries or people that are devoted to being as wicked as they could possibly be, to devote themselves to the one God, or being as holy as they could be, and then the average person somewhere in the middle is trying to live up to one side or the other to whatever extent they seem capable of doing. Now you have, or hopefully will, watch a video that has to do with China, separated by mountains, deserts, and seas. China developed independent of the rest of the world center of cultures. Now, when I would have grown up in school, talking about the four major cultures of the ancient world, the first would have been the Samaritan culture that founded the Middle East. You then have the Egyptian culture, and now we're getting to the other two, China and then India. China culture spread a unified culture over a large area, larger than any other of the ancient civilizations. Chinese cultures domesticated the pig, they cultivated millet, which is a grain, and then also produced silk that they were then able to weave into cloth. This became a staple of their own culture and then through trade into other parts of the world. They lived in walled towns for protection from aggressive bands of nomads that came from the north, Mongols, and then eventually built a large protective barrier that we call a wall to keep them out. That is still there to this day. It didn't really work. It didn't really keep them out. But that's a whole other issue. Kings chosen from the military elite. The Shah ran China in the 5th century BC. The Shang, a tribe from the north, overcame them. And then after 1030 BC, the Chao tribe or dynasty came out of the west and overthrew the Shang. This will lead into what you will see in the video, the Warring States period. In 221 BC, the king Qin united the Warring States and became China's first emperor. And there was an emperor on the throne of China from then through various dynasties until 1915, when the communists overthrew the last Chinese emperor. In 206 BC, a peasant, Lu Peng, established the Han dynasty in China. Here, the Chinese religious development have two major figures. This played a key connective role in maintaining the social order. Magic was used to manipulate two conflicting but complementary forces that are pictured here in the Taoism symbol of the yin and the yang. They would show that all things seem to have some coordination, as you can tell in this symbolism. Things that are dark, masculine, and warm are dark. Things that are cold, feminine, and white. But if you notice, they move around each other so that they are cooperate, but there's also a sense that they are not exclusive. So in the center of whichever one this is, I don't know it well enough to say this is Jing or that is Jing, but this is, you can see that the opposite characteristic does have a center of inside it, so that neither side is exclusive to the other. You then have Confucianism, which this is a drawing of Confucius. And Confucianism is rationalized hierarchy. And this may be considered a religion, but it's also more of a way of life. And it even governs social structures, even among people that might even be considered Christians or otherwise. In Oriental culture, it can be very much a part of to honor your ancestors and authority structures and the like. Family and ancestors and that sort of thing. And customs of bowing and showing respect and all of that is still a part of a lot of Christians in the Middle East, in the Far East too. Taoism is called intuitive mysticism, and that includes the yin and the yang and other Eastern mysticism that is practiced by a lot of New Age or modern type of Westerners that are trying to have a way of connecting to connecting spirituality. And then there's also a school of law that tries to delineate much of this wisdom into legal codes, and they have the very unique name as legalism. And to create structures that go beyond just family life, as Confucianism would. Now, India. The Indus Valley duplicated what occurred in Mesopotamia around 2500 BC. The economy was based on irrigated farming. There's not much known about them, partly because we have never been able to learn how to read their language. No Rosetta Stone here. So we haven't been able to discern a lot of their wisdom because of this. They domesticated the chicken. That every time you eat chicken, you're eating Indian food, even if it's southern fried. Southern fried Indian chicken. Because chickens come from India. The group of Indo-European semi-barbaric migrants called themselves Aryans, conquered India, not the kind of Aryans that are made famous within, that Hitler was dealing with, not that Aryans, but they really are connected at some level, and I'll tell you why. Because he was trying to get to the core characteristics of what it meant to be an Indo-European. And these are very early Indo-Europeans, these Aryans that come down into India and conquer it. And this is why the languages of India today are very similar to the languages of Europe. Latin and Hindi, the main root language in India, are both derivatives of Ugaritic. So if you really want to know that. And that is sort of the root language that creates all the Indo-European family of languages. And so they are connected. So you might think, like, if you really wanted to study, if you were good in Latin and you were good in English, you'll find out later on this semester if you're good in English. But you might do well studying and trying to translate the Bible into Indian languages because they're similar. They're based similarly in other languages, similar to that. Now, Hinduism. The Aryans spoke a form of Sanskrit, which is a derivative of Ugaritic, and settled in the northwestern areas of India and Afghanistan. They worshiped the storm god Indira, pictured here, with hymns memorized from a book of poems called the Rig Veda. Now, the Rig Veda is thought to be the oldest surviving book written in an Indo-European language, originally in an Indo-European language. And it speaks of three classical classes called Varnas, with the outcasts known as untouchables. And in India, there were three major classes. There were the Brahmins, and then those that were merchants, and then farmers. And so depending on which class you were born into, that determined what you would be. And then the untouchables were the people who were not in any class. And they were at the very bottom of society. The Brahmins perfected singing the Vertic verses, and these were called mantras. And the holy sound became part of their language of meditation. The Upshalats composed around 600 BC, encouraged the development of ascetics and mystical religious ideas and practices that included early forms of yoga. Now, yoga is an ascetic and mystical religious practice, and sometimes today we think of it as sort of like a sophisticated exercise that people are engage in, and I mean, even Hillary Clinton was doing yoga and was emailing people about it, and she wanted to delete all those yoga emails. But what we recognize is that it's not the ability to hold certain positions, but or even the idea of certain kinds of movement or whatever that makes yoga a problem. It's the idea that this really is connected back to meditation on the gods and such that they were worshiping during this period. It's a form of the way that they worship. Indian religious traditions also include Jainism. Now, Jainism is probably the most Indian of all religions. It's not much, it hasn't expanded outside of India very much. Now, today, if you cannot become an Orthodox Hindu without being born into a caste. So recently, Hinduism has become far more evangelistic, but Buddhism, which we will get to in a little bit, but Buddhism is sort of like Hinduism released from this cultural prison in almost the same way that Christianity is releasing Judaism, the ideas and ethics of Judaism through Jesus Christ, liberated from the cultural box that Judaism was in. It almost has the same type of relationship. You will find in American cities now something called Indian cultural centers that are popping up everywhere, and those are sort of Hindu mission outposts. They're not just places to go get some Indian food and so forth. Indian cultural centers, they're really more like Hindu outposts in the United States, but that's more recent. Now, Jains are the defenders of all beings. They believe in the ethical value that the most important duty of a person, Ishmaya, is the most important duty of a person is to cause no harm or pain to any being, regardless how insignificant it may seem. Minerva, the most significant figure in Jainist belief, the faith's last great teacher. After 13 years of asceticism, he escaped the bondage of his past karma and was liberated. He died in a deliberate death from inaction by deliberately sitting himself in a posture of meditation without the intent of ever moving again, and that is a picture of him as he prepared to die. So he just liberated himself from all of his past karma, and then he just sat down and waited for the inevitable and tried not to move.
Right.
Somehow that is not to be admired. I'm sorry, but anyway. They accept the reality of samsara and karma and regard muksha to be the only sensible goal to pursue in life. And here are these three concepts. First is the rebirth of the soul in a new body. So they believe in reincarnation, which would be true for Buddhism and Hinduism too at some level, but reincarnation is the key. That's why you don't harm any creature, like a fly, a cockroach, a cow, or your grandmother. It's all the same, because the cockroach might be your great-grandmother, who wasn't a very good person, who's coming back as a cockroach. And if she's a good cockroach, she might become a dragonfly and then a chicken and move on from there to get back to being a human. If you think that way, now if my grandfather who was not a good man, and my grandfather was, but I'm just using this as an example, came back as a cockroach, I would think he would appreciate it if he was being a good cockroach for me to move him out of that existence and up to a higher one.
I was just gonna say what you just said.
Okay, yeah, I mean, doesn't that seem to, that, at least, anyway, I just help him out a bit. And if he's not a good cockroach, he better, he's just gonna come back as something else that I might send him off
Were
on.
they all vegetarians? They don't eat?
They are all vegetarians, well, yes, and they're also not farmers. Because by plowing the soil, they might kill an insect or a bug or something, which they will not do. Most Jains are more middle-class merchants who pay other people to do things for them that they would find unacceptable, like raise food. But they are not, but they would be vegetarians, yes. But they would not grow their own food because that might hurt something that they would wish not to kill.
That's crazy.
Unseen power of past deeds or action, that's karma. The karma is the power that follows me from my past lives into this life. And people who talk about good karma and bad karma, the reason why bad things happen is because I'm being impacted by the bad stuff from before. And when good things happen that are a surprise, we may say that, but we're thinking it flows from this idea that the power of my unseen deeds from before. And mushka is escape from this cycle of rebirth and move into a liberation. Now remember, the last person to do this was this guy who did nothing and just kind of sat there after purifying himself from all of his past karma. So it doesn't happen very often. The path of mushka centers on the practice of asceticism, trying to discipline the body and limit my impact from my past lives. They place special emphasis on the idea that all beings have a soul and experience pain. That gets to the idea that the cockroach has pain, the human beings, it's all the same. Now, you know the Hindus they treasure cows. So there are certain animals that they see as special, but they might eat something else. Now, most Hindus, I think, a lot of them would be vegetarians too. Not sure what the McDonald's in New Delhi serves. There is one. Time revolves.
Dr. E,
Yeah.
there is a McDonald's there, and they serve veggie burgers.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it. Hopefully that will not become popular elsewhere. Where it's necessary, that's good to know. Time revolves in an endless cycle, like a great cosmic wheel. And we will deal with the cosmic wheel in a little bit. But in India, if you notice, the flag of India has a wheel in the center, which is a symbol back to this view of time. In Muska, the soul ascends to the top point of the universe where it exists in complete purity forever. Numbers, significant, the numbers who achieve this are never tremendously large, but those who do, or claim to, or believe to, are revered within the faith. Now, Buddhism. The Buddhism was discovered by Buddha. Now, we're going to have an old report on him, and his life is very fascinating. There's a lot of similarities between Buddhism and Jainism. Similarities are that they derive from the life and teachings of a great man, stress the purity of the teacher, and do not rely upon on any god or divine rights to pursue the highest goal of life. In Buddhism, unlike Hinduism that has lots of gods, deity type peoples, Buddhism really doesn't have any gods at all. And when we see these statues, we might think they worship them, and they very well may. But Buddha in his lifetime would not have appreciated statues made of him as though they were being worshipped, because he did not see himself as semi-divine, nor did he teach that. Now, a Buddha is someone who has awakened from sleep. And there are times that in the dorm, there are people who just don't want to become a Buddha because they will not be awakened from sleep no matter what you do. Now, Buddha's great awakening is the greatest discovery of truth of life that has ever been made. Now, the way it goes, the man who became the Buddha, the original Buddha, the way of Brahmana, his father was told that his son, who was his only son, and he wanted him to succeed him as leader of an Indian province, would one day become disillusioned and join an ascetic and become a holy man. And so he decided that he would keep him confined to the palace where he would not see anyone old, anyone dead, anyone sick, or any holy men, for fear that that would set him on a quest to understand these things. So his whole life, he is a young man now, he had never seen anyone old, anyone sick, anyone dead, no holy men. But he decided that he would go out and just visit the countryside, and while he was there, he met an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and a holy man. And these were profound mysteries to him, and he decided after he got done with this that he would understand the true nature of these things. And he sat and sat and sat and sat and sat and thought and thought and thought and thought, and then eventually he decided that he understood this and woke up from his and was full of great understanding. And he came up with these 4 truths that are designed to govern life. 1, suffering dominates our existence. 2, the cause of suffering is desire or craving. The reason why we suffer is because we want things. It is possible to distinguish suffering by extinguishing its cause, thereby obtaining nirvana. So you must extinguish the desire for things and be unselfish, and give up need, give up a sense of entitlement. And one of the reasons why Buddhism is becoming so popular among young people, especially in the West, in America, is because there's this sense of perpetual search for betterment. Whereas if they thought Christianity was always saying, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, here you are being told you're not as good as you could be if you just tried a little harder at extinguishing desire from your life and figuring out how to do that. And so if Christianity isn't really built around salvation, this is a much better way to live. From the perspective of how you feel about yourself going through it. I can see why this is true. And then in order to extinguish suffering, one should get on the eightfold path, noble eightfold path that leads to the extinction of desire and leads to nirvana and my ability to become part of the great spirit up there when I die the next time. For them, nirvana amounts to gaining mushka for a Jain. Same basic idea. The essential element of action is the desire to get something for oneself. A person who exhibits desire no longer performs actions. You just be willing to accept life as it is. And so Now, for this, the three precious jewels of Buddhism are the Buddha himself, the person, the Dharma of the teachings of Buddha. That is sort of like this, the collection of truths that a Buddhist would hold dear. There was a television program that had a woman's name, Dharma, that was based out in California. I always thought that that program was just weird. Then when I'm studying Buddhism, I realized where this name comes from, and it fits right in. These writers probably were Buddhists. She was it was a white person, but the name wasn't selected by accident. She was to express the modern California hip person. And so it wasn't selected by mistake. And then the Sangha, which is sort of like the church, if you want to call it that, the community of believers that follow the Buddhist teachings. Now, stupas, S-T-U-P-A-S, are shrines that, according to legend, contain some of the ashes of the original Buddha. And most of them are in India, even though India has relatively few Buddhists today. It's interesting that the land where Buddhism developed in India, there's very few Buddhists anymore. Most of them are in Thailand, Burma, Korea, Japan, China, Nepal, Tibet, areas like that. Maybe some in northern northern India, but most of them are refugees from Tibet, forced out by the Chinese government, that have moved there since the 1950s. But before that, there were almost none. They had all left India. Buddhism renounces, created the first monastic communities in which people pursuing spiritual goals live together under strict rules. 4 sins warrant permanent expulsion from a community: fornication, stealing, murder, and making false claims about one's spiritual attainments. So the sexually immoral, those who steal something. It's interesting. If everyone believes that they don't own anything, you wonder how they can steal. If they surrendered all their worldly goods to become monks. But stealing, murder, clearly, you don't want to have a monk running around murdering each other there in the monastery. And then if you claim to be more spiritually, attained spiritual life than you did, you would be out. Now, some of these monasteries, they also aren't allowed to speak. And only speak with permission. I was told about one person who joined one of these Buddhist monasteries, and every year on his annual review day, he was only allowed to say 2 words. And so when he got in to meet with his superior, the first year he said, "Food bad." His second year, he came up and he said, "Bed hard." His third year, he came up for review and they said, "You've done well. You've now earned your right to say another 2 words." And he said, "I quit." And the man said, "We aren't surprised because all you've been doing is complaining ever since you got here." Because all of his words were negative. Everything he said was a complaint about the food and the bed and things. Now, Buddhism has broken into two groups. One is Mahatria, a dramatic tale of Buddhism that gives of heroism. Some believe it may be the longest work in literature in the world. But some of the most treasured pieces of Hindu literature is the Bhagavad Gita. The Greeks came into this area, controlled Punjab, setting up a base of operation, and overran Kashirin and took over the northern part of India in 40 AD. India then would become a part of the would become part of a Greek orb of influence as well. So it's Indian, then it becomes Persian, then it becomes Greek. Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains are all accept the concept of reincarnation, and time is circular, with the creation, destruction of the universe in eras called Maha-angas. The great vehicle movement of Maya Buddhism stresses that pious Buddhists should imitate the Buddha directly. The ideal Buddhist is one who postponed his entry into final nirvana so that he could guide the suffering world to a greater height, and that he would live in that way. This still is practiced in Tibet, Korea, Japan, and China. And of course, the Dalai Lama, which is not something that you buy in gift shops, stuff, the Dalai Lama, but it is a real person, not a doll. But the Dalai Lama is the spiritual head of this kind of Buddhism. When the Dalai Lama dies, his spirit is thought to enter the womb of a woman who is about ready to give birth, and then what they will do is they will go around and find children born about the time the last Dalai Lama died, and then bring them in and interview them when they get to be like 3 years old or so, and pick the one they believe the spirit of the last Dalai Lama entered when it died. And then train that person, hopefully they pick someone who's capable of doing this, pick and train that person to be the next spiritual leader of the Buddhist faith. The other more liberal one, Theapha Buddhism, in the doctrine of the elders, survives in Sri Lanka, in the south of India, and Southeast Asia, in areas like Thailand and Vietnam, places like that. Now, here's my last slide. This is another group which I learned about, which is not, but it probably should be seen as the fifth of these ancient cultures, and it's called the linear pottery culture. They're called that because they put lines on their pots. Linear pottery culture. There's also the battle axe cultures, and guess what? They had battle axes that they used when they were fighting, probably to break the linear pottery pots. So anyway, from the Netherlands to Russia, these linear pottery culture people decorated pottery with parallel lines. They built clusters of permanent family farmlands, cultivated barley and other grains, brought those with them into Europe. They domesticated sheep, goats, dogs, and cattle. They built huge stone megaliths, the most famous of which is in Stonehenge. But I never saw that. I was close to it. I was nearby when I was in England. We were at Salisbury, which is not, but it's hard to get to. You've got to schedule your time. This is in the pre-virus era, pre-virus antiquities. But but you had to, you not only schedule your day, but your time too. And I wasn't sure exactly when we were getting into that era in order to get on your shuttle bus and they'll take you in to see it because it's such a popular site. They were able to have metallurgy using fire to shape metal. Copper was used to make tools and jewelry, and they traded in metals, flourished with other cultures where they could get things that they needed. Now the battle axe cultures that you might see here on this map as well replaced the linear pottery cultures between 3000 BC and 22,000 BC, named for the stone and copper axes that they used, lived in rectangular family thatched homes. They domesticated the horse, were best known as inhabitants in southern Russia, spoke a parent Indo-European language. Some of the things that they did, they brought into Europe the plow, individualized graves. Instead of just burying everyone in a mass grave, individual graves for each person. Warriors gained power, wealth, and influence in their communities. These groups became known as nobles or aristocrats and will lay the foundation in Europe for the tiered society with nobility at the top and common men at the bottom. You wonder how certain people might become nobles who don't have really any wealth or anything, but they have a title. It may go back centuries or millennia, back into the early pre-Roman era, even in Europe. Male-dominated culture that controlled wealth and privilege in European society, and sometimes well into the 18th century within their culture group. Okay, well, we are done. When we come back on Monday, I will start with our introduction to Greece test Wednesday. And since everyone's here, be aware, we are going to do our test on the computer, so bring your computers with you. If you want a paper test, you need to let me know in time for me to have one ready for you on test day. What? Okay, send me a message so that I remember to do that. Otherwise, you will be doing it on a computer anyway, or not doing one at all. So keep that in mind. All right. And for those of you who are beaming in from across the fruited plain, you will do your test during class time like we did when we were doing Zoom classes last year.
No, sit back like that.
I've never had like this much.
Hey, Dr. E, can I write my memory verse in front of you?
Is this something where you're